Welcome back to the water cooler, everybody. This last election, as we all know, had a rotten stench that unfortunately carried over to the Biden administration and its policies. Former President Donald Trump is well aware of the fact that something fishy happened during the 2020 presidential election. During his rally over the weekend in South Carolina, he made sure to bring up the fact that our elections need to be protected and fair. Have a look.
Twice. I won twice, and I did much better the second time than we did the first, getting 12 million more votes, and now we may have to run again. At the federal, state, and local level, Republicans must act to ensure universal voter ID, citizenship confirmation, no more drop boxes, no more private money paying for so-called help with the elections. And we must ensure that every election can be fully and quickly audited.
Listen, folks, I'm not sure why universal voter ID is even a big controversial issue. Maybe because the left knows if elections had to be fair, they know they'd never see the Oval Office again. Now, look, if I need an ID to go to the doctor, buy a beer, drive a car, I think a government-issued ID should be standard practice when deciding the fate of our nation. Oh, and here's a news flash for you, and to the liberals who think enforcing voter ID is racist, I would like you to explain to me why you think people of color can't get hold of a government-issued ID. I'd love to see them make one logical point that isn't racist. This is a rant for another day, but why is it that the very party that screams they're not racist is the only party being racist by assuming people of color are so misfortunate they can't even acquire an ID? Anyway, I tell you what else America can't acquire? Oil. Yet another reason the Biden administration belongs in a scene from the comedy The Office and not in the Oval Office. Take a look at what President Trump had to say about our nation's manufacturing crisis.
One of the most important lessons of the past 2 years is that to be a strong nation, America must also be a manufacturing nation. We have to bring back our manufacturing. We cannot count on China or any other country to give us our critical products. And we cannot have our vital supply chains. Who ever heard of this? You can't get anything. The stores are half empty. We have a supply chain. Nobody ever even talked about this. And this all came out of the stench of the Biden administration. Stretches all over the globe. Under a Republican Congress, we should pass historic legislation and powerful tariffs to bring our essential industries back home.
He's absolutely right, folks. Biden's major fumble of the Keystone Pipeline to help make America energy independent is a major reason our gas prices are what now? $4, $5, $6, $7. And while the major news networks might be in bed with the Biden administration, claiming that Biden is not to blame for the major shift in gas prices, we all know the truth here. Well, joining me now to discuss this more is Morgan Ortagus, congressional candidate for Tennessee's 5th District. Morgan, thanks for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, David.
Well, Morgan, real quick, I want to play just a small clip of Donald Trump's rally where he mentions the wokeness of our military. I want to discuss this with you. Have a look.
We have to get political correctness out of our military. The woke generals should be fired immediately. We want our generals to think about winning wars, not to teach pronouns.
Well, not to teach pronouns, he says. So, Morgan, this accentuates the issue of political correctness, the wokeism. In Congress. In your opinion, how much less are we getting done because some of our congressional folks out there are too focused on being like, they like to be liked by like the rainbow-haired they-them crowd and not focused enough on the bettering of our nation?
Well, so looking at both the military and at Congress. So if you look at the military, David, what's the purpose? The purpose is to kill bad guys. The purpose is to keep America safe. And at a time when we have North Korea building up their nuclear arsenal, whenever you have China testing hypersonics, obviously when you have Russia on their adventures. And by the way, before Russia even invaded Ukraine, they were defying arms control treaties that they were in with us. This is why we got out of INF. So you have real threats to the United States. Look, we just saw over the weekend, Iran sent ballistic missiles in the area, in the vicinity of our U.S. consulate in Erbil, Iraq, and other U.S. government facilities. So there are threats and attacks from all sides. And that's what we should be focused. That's what our military should be focused on. How do we deter those threats and how do we kill bad guys? That's it. That's its purpose as an institution. And then second, as it relates to the Congress, you're complaining that they're not getting more done. I don't know, David. I'm not sure that I want the Democrats in Congress to get anything else done. I'd be fine if they're, distracted in their districts with some of these silly fights that you just referenced.
Well, that's true. I will say this. They are passing $14 billion worth of aid to Ukraine. What do we do on Ukraine? Because, look, we want to support the Ukrainian people as it relates to, the hardships that they're under. But, look, let's be honest. I mean, I'm curious to get your take on this. I mean, I don't want to get into Zelensky so much, but look, Ukraine's got problems with corruption. I mean, this is not like this model democracy we're talking about here. Putin's a real bad guy. So what do we do? I mean, we're going to send $14 billion over to Ukraine when we can't even send a buck to our border?
So the Republicans in Congress, especially when we take it back in November, are going to have to hold the Biden administration accountable for their failed foreign policy decisions. Let's not forget, with all the noise going on with Russia and Ukraine, what was the Biden administration's stated goal? Their goal was to prevent Russia from invading Ukraine. Therefore, they failed at that goal. So we're going to have to hold them accountable for all of their failed foreign policy decisions. And yes, we should absolutely be concerned about our own border and funding our own border. I believe that Republicans in Congress should be smart enough to walk and chew gum at the same time. And it is a national security issue what's happening at our border. I've talked about this a lot because when I worked for President Trump and Mike Pompeo's State Department that you covered, we went with DHS to Mexico, into the Northern Triangle countries, and helped President Trump secure the border by getting things like the Remain in Mexico policy, the asylum cooperation agreements, while President Trump was, of course, building the wall. So President Trump has shown us the model for how you secure a border and the policies that you need to put in place. It's just that the Biden administration undid all of it when they came into office in the name of some sort of, human rights or some sort of humanity. Well, I don't think it's very humane to have traffickers trafficking young women to the border in the hopes of a new life in America. Meanwhile, they're getting raped along the way, right? I don't think it's humane to have these people. God only knows how many of them were unfortunately contracting COVID during the height of it because of the sequestering that the Biden administration put them in. I don't think it's very humane to have fentanyl coming across the border, resulting in it being the #1 killer of young people in our country. So if we want to talk about what is humane and what's not humane, having a border that we can defend, that protects our country, that is ultimately what is the most humane.
Right. And you tweeted the other day, I want to put up a tweet. You said, I've got about a minute or so left, maybe a little bit more, that Biden's reckless spending is a lot to blame for the rising inflation we're seeing. So in your opinion, what are some things Biden is allotting way too much money for where he should be putting that money somewhere else?
Well, thank you so much for bringing this up. I think this is really important because the Biden administration is trying to disguise where inflation and rising gas prices are coming from. They keep blaming Putin, and they know that that's not true because the numbers that we just had out at the end of last week with inflation at 7.9%, and the price of oil up 6.6%. This is pre-invasion, before Putin invaded Ukraine. So these are pre-invasion numbers. And this is a direct result of not only of the reckless spending, I think that's really important, but what's also equally important, David, is remember that the oil and gas industry in the United States, their very existence is under attack by the Biden administration. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't hyperbole or an overreaction or anything that I'm saying here. Look at what President Biden said on the campaign trail. He said this multiple times that he basically wanted to eliminate the oil and gas industry. And I think because he was mostly campaigning from his bedroom, maybe people didn't believe him, or maybe they didn't understand the ramifications of that policy. Yeah. Well, whether or not they passed a Green New Deal, that policy is in effect the ability to show the market that, hey, this is not oil and gas is not something we want to invest in. Right. We want this industry to essentially go away. That is their stated aim. That's their stated goal. Whether or not they pass the Green New Deal or not, that's what they're putting into place by going after the oil and gas industry in the U.S.
Morgan Ortagus, great to have you up against a hard break. Talk about your congressional race next time around. Thanks, Morgan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Back in a moment. Eric Naputi.